right, everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Spiritual Asshole. I'm so excited to be joined by Dr. Tori Olds. She's a PhD psychologist. She has a hit YouTube channel. She's a musician. How you doing?
I'm doing great this morning. It's good to talk with you, Brendan.
So good to talk to you. So you live in Austin and you practice psychology. Is it hard being the only person in Austin with a real job?
Well, I don't know if you know that my whole family and everybody I know, I grew up with two psychologists. My husband's a psychologist. My sister's, my sister, literally the whole family are shrinks. So if you call that a real job, then yes, that was all I knew growing up was therapy talk.
Wow. So I would think that you'd want to rebel against that, no?
No, I loved it. I wanted more. I was almost mad when my parents wouldn't therapize me. Like, I'm like, what the heck? You guys have skills here. Why are you like?
Wow.
So
Well,
yeah, I've always loved it.
that's actually an interesting jumping off point. I wasn't going to ask you about this, but I have to. I
Mhm.
do feel like we're in this very interesting era now where everybody's going to therapy. So now everybody has kind of started, especially in LA, because you use the word like
Yeah.
everybody out here is therapizing everything. What do you think about this trend? Because now everybody's a narcissist.
I know that is true. I know. It is
Everyone in the world is a textbook narcissist. I'm like, well, that can't be true, but okay, keep telling that lie to yourself.
it is really true. We have these like really funny, popular, trending
Yeah,
diagnoses that are actually, but I don't give a lot of weight to diagnoses anyway. But I mean, narcissism, not that narcissism isn't a thing, but I just don't think diagnostically. I don't diagnose my clients. It's not like, when they run the DSM through like statistics, those clusters don't fall together in any meaningful way. They're literally just a random. Most of them. I mean, bipolar. There are things that are like probably going on in the brain and like are a real thing, but like depression. I mean, those categories are somewhat arbitrary, and I don't find them useful myself anyway. But that actually brings us into parts work, even as well. I mean, that will become clear why as we talk more, probably. But yes, I love the new awareness of psychology. Anything's always going to be a little goofy, like because we super goofy. Like I love IFS. We might be talking about parts work, and people can be goofy about it. They can take it and be like they want to make things into like they get excited about it and then almost like make it into like religion,
yeah.
and so I think we always are a little bit funny with anything we get excited about, but
That's what I think is kind of what's going on. So yeah, let's get into it. So you practice a lot of different kinds of therapy. Is it fun watching patients come up with so many different ways to blame their parents?
actually what's more fun is how many ways they come up to not blame their parents. That is
Wow.
much more of a difficulty psychologically. We have a huge attachment need to hold our parents, the image of our parents intact. So starting from very young, we want to say, no, they were okay. It was normal. It was my fault. And even people who intellectually maybe could say something else on a heart level, they're probably protecting their parents and blame. And that's a huge reason we tend to blame ourselves.
See, I'm like so far at the other end of this where like I've like held off even having kids so far because I'm like, I can't mess them up. I can't do anything to them. I know how powerful I am. What do you
Yeah.
think about that? You have kids yourself. Let's talk about it.
Which part? Parenting? I mean, the fact you are worried about that is probably a good sign. It's the parents that are like, I am perfect. I will be wonderful. Who cares about the, and it's like, uh, again, narcissism, right? But, I think the fact you're thinking like, oh, like I care about, I realize it's a thing where I could pass down my issues to my child and I might want to be mindful of that. Like, probably that already puts you in like the top some percent of,
That's hilarious. Yeah, so do you think that in your work with all these different kinds of therapies that you do, is it crazy that it all just comes back to childhood? Has that pretty much been your conclusion? Because I've now talked to a lot of people, and I'm like, that's kind of always the answer.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's complicated. I actually study forms of therapy. What I like about them, especially coherence therapy, which is a little different than a lot of therapies, that we come in with no assumption about what the symptom is based on. It could be childhood, what we might think of as attachment issues, but it could be a later trauma. It could be educational trauma or racism or medical trauma, or so we kind of like come in with a like, we don't know. We're just gonna like really, really stay open and listen and see if we can figure out what's underneath. That being said, we all have wounded child parts. I mean, like, and a lot of them will always come back to mom and dad or whoever was our parent figures, because they're human and they messed up, and we are very hurt by that. I think when we're young, our brains are just sponges for learning because we're having to figure out how to survive and be human and adapt. And so any learning that's like, we're young, it was very painful, or had to do with other people. Those are like learnings that our brain is like really like other people. Okay, that was really painful. I want to learn about how never have that pain happen again. Certainly when we're young, so I think that collection like means childhood is like open to like a lot of vulnerability to wounding.
Yeah, I saw Bruce Lipton, and he said that from the ages 0 to 7, you're actually in such a deep brain state, theta state, that you're actually being hypnotized. And I was like, oh my God, because that's how spongy you actually are.
You're very spongy.
You're such a sponge. Okay, so let's talk about why you don't like or do diagnosis. So why is that the case?
I mean, okay, so it's funny. I was just watching a Daniel Siegel talk before this, if you know his work. He's has a wonderful psychiatrist and brain researcher that has a field called interpersonal neurobiology that's amazing. And, he was talking about how one time he just realized, like, of all of these diagnoses, like, it's really what they represent more like scientifically is just a tendency to either go toward chaos or rigidity or both. So like
Wow.
everything can like either be like too much defendedness and rigidity and control, or like chaos where there's like too much emotion flowing and streaming of hard stuff from our subcortical brain. And like that works for me diagnostically. Like, okay, so either they're kind of like stuck in like rigid systems of protection, or they're like don't know what to do and are like flooded. But even that, I mean, I love his work, but even that, I've been really leaning more into the coherence therapy. My mentor is a guy named Bruce Ecker.
Oh yeah, I watched your video.
Yeah, he's so
Yeah.
brilliant. If anyone really wants to understand the mind, his book Unlocking the Emotional Brain is probably the best like psychology book. I mean, Daniel Siegel's Mindsight is wonderful too. There's other great books, but Unlocking the Emotional Brain really talks about both why we get stuck and what the science of therapeutic breakthroughs, which there hasn't been a science of that until recently that we understood. We always had a more developmental frame, which is like slowly and steadily you can grow up, you can develop, you can mature, you can gain skills. That's also a great frame and we should keep it. But there is these things that happen in life and hopefully in therapy occasionally where it's a breakthrough. That means a whole neural network. That's like we can talk about what I mean by neural network, but it's like a firing pattern, like a pattern of emotion behavior,
Yeah.
a whole neural firing pattern can actually totally rewire in 2 to 3 seconds if things are set up correctly. And that's when people have the aha, like not just the aha insight, but like an actual breakthrough where they're like, oh my God, I just suddenly don't have the compulsion to eat, or, And so I'm interested in that science. I like leaning toward creating as many breakthroughs as possible, even though it's not, like a magic trick or something. It takes work, but that is the science that Bruce Ecker leans into. It's called memory reconsolidation. It's pretty new. I mean, it's 20 years. The research around the early 2000s is when the brain research came out, but still most therapists aren't aware of it. It's like, I'm trying to get the word out. He's trying to get the word out. So more and more you hear people talking about it, but it's also a very interesting science.
Yeah, see, like I guess why I like what you do so much, and why I on this podcast have said like sometimes I don't think talk therapy is actually helpful, is transitioning from getting out of the victim state into a thriving state. Like you had that video, how to go from survive to thrive, and I think that a lot of times diagnosis will keep you stuck in a survival state because it's the known place that your brain has been.
Yeah.
So I would love to know more about, well, what you think about how we can go from surviving to thriving. And like, yeah, like the whole like blaming your parents. I'm like, cool, now that you know that, but like now what? Who
You
cares? Like
grieve.
that's
And
happened
then
to everybody.
no, but then you grieve. That's the next
Oh, really? So what does that look like? Pound cake?
I mean, yeah, we could talk a lot about what grief is. I think the bottom line thing is mental health is being able to be present with reality as it is, as closely as we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean like philosophical reality. Like there's a lot of things we don't know about reality, or you could have one perspective and I can have another. I just mean like basic reality. Like I could be in touch with the reality that my mom died when I was young and that really hurt me. Or I can be in touch with the reality that you are actually coming close to me and you don't, I could just be in the present moment and sort of like generally here and willing to face life as it is.
Okay.
And most of us, that's really hard to just face life as it is, face our feelings, face, you know, not just the hard stuff, but actually the good stuff too, like really find the beautiful things we hold, but just like really be in reality because because of attachment stuff, because the role of the parent is to support the child in being able to witness reality and it not breaking them or
Cool.
causing
That's
them.
a really good way of saying that. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, or causing them to become rigid, to become boundary, defended and need to turn away from it,
Mm.
or ignore it or go into avoidance, which we are all so living from avoidance. It's interesting. So that's what I so okay. So you come into reality with like, look, my parents really hurt me. It's not a blame. In fact, often after people process their feelings about that, there's so much compassion. Now finally is when they can be in compassion.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
point. That's how I kind of feel now.
Yeah, yeah. But when you're avoiding it and you're kind of like half noticing it, maybe you talk about it intellectually, but don't really tap it into it in your on a heart, body, embodied level. You can get in narratives and complaints, but like when you really slow down and say that actually really hurt me, I might have to process through anger. That's usually a step. I might have to process through my pain, my sadness. Not might, I will. Once I actually move through those healthy feelings and metabolize them and deal with this reality of what actually happened to me, then I'm much more in a soft place to be forgiving if I need to be. I mean, I don't push my clients to forgive their parents, but it just naturally is like, oh, I think they were trying their best, or like it just brings on a more a deeper wisdom. I don't know how to say it. State often comes after emotional processing, but
So yeah, is that is that what grieving looks like to you? Just
yeah,
sitting with it or
sitting with it,
helping
metabolizing
to,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. How can we integrate it into allow it to be real, but at the same time finding the resources to hold us through that moment, so that there's something, it's like, it's not only the bad, it's like, okay, there's this hard thing that was hard, and I'm feeling supported right now. And I feel, this lovely cup of tea my friend gave me, like there's love still in this world. So I can just kind of like hold the both and like, I think it's really helpful when we have maps of reality that are both and, can like
Mm.
the good and the bad kind of coexist.
And that's a great segue into parts work.
Yeah.
I actually I just saw Inside Out too, and I was thinking like this is kind of like parts work. The idea. Are you familiar with this movie?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen the second one yet, so don't spoil it for me, but the first
Yeah,
one
yeah.
definitely.
No, it's the same, same idea. Like you have
Yeah.
all these emotions and to not see them as bad. Like we're so quick to label anger, fear, sadness as bad, or at least I am. So
Yeah.
the idea of parts work, well, let's talk about it. How do you
Well,
see
it's
it?
interesting. I mean, yeah, emotion. I, I think we're used to talking about feelings. We finally kind of got used to talking about feelings. I mean, Inside Out actually helped with that. I thought they did a brilliant job of getting us,
Oh yeah.
kids and everything talking about feelings. So parts are something a little more complex than feelings.
Yeah, that's true.
Although I will say Joy in the first Inside Out was acting like a part. She wasn't acting like Joy. She was acting like a part because she
Mm.
wasn't just happiness when it's authentic to be happiness. She was happiness with a learning on top. I have to be happy or else mom and dad will feel stressed. They're already stressed enough. So now it's my role or job to make sure, what's the girl's name? I can't remember.
Oh, I
Uh,
know what you mean.
make sure
Riley.
Riley, make sure she's always happy because that's the only acceptable. That's actually a part. So maybe that's a good way to distinguish
Yeah, I
between.
guess my analogy is that similar to this between the feelings and emotions with Inside Out and parts work is the idea that all of these things are actually there trying to help you. Even if,
Emotion, yes,
right?
exactly. Well, all of it's adaptive. Even parts are adaptive. So parts are just a little more complex. So emotion would just be, I think of emotion as like my deeper mind saying, pay attention to something.
Yeah.
Something cued us as maybe important. Maybe it's a possibility, maybe it's a danger, maybe it's a loss, and we have to like deal with that and figure out how we're gonna be okay and reach out for help or whatever, or problem solve. So it's there to cue us and be like, hey, hey, conscious neocortex, we probably need to attend to this because otherwise our intellectual brain is very distractible and could look somewhere else and not realize that something big and important is going on. But parts are one more step complex than that. Parts are neural networks that hold, I guess the simplest way to really start is saying they're learned responses.
Yes.
They're predictions about what things mean, like what's safe, what's dangerous. If this danger comes based on trial and error or whatever, however this got ingrained in me, I learned this response to protect myself. At least is this
And do you feel like they're also forward looking, that they're also looking out for future?
there. Well, okay, yes. Okay, so that I don't know if that's getting too in the weeds. There's a couple different kinds of parts, and there is one that is forward looking. So we can get into that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yes. Yeah.
but but the main idea of a part is that the reason we even talk about parts is because a lot of the time when we're moving through life, we don't realize that we're not really using our full adult intelligence with how we're showing up in this moment. We're leaning into memory and like these ingrained patterns of expectation, what something means and how I'm supposed to respond. And those are kind of automated and they just kind of take over our system and we don't realize like, like we don't even pause to notice it. It just like colors our whole consciousness.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's kind of like in the Inside Out when like the different characters like take over that dashboard.
Yes.
We call it like the seat of consciousness. It's like our seat of consciousness can be like taken over by like a part. And then, but then our whole perception of reality in that moment and how our impulses for how we're supposed to respond and all that are really colored by what a singular neural network has learned and had imprinted. And when that kind of neural network takes over and is like, no, this is dangerous, or you're bad, or they're bad, or blah, blah, and starts to kind of, it's like a narrative, but also has like action tendencies. Like I want to defend, or I need to blame myself, or I need to procrastinate. When one of those learned responses takes over, I don't know that we are trained to really realize that's why I'm so glad we're starting to talk about parts is because, yeah, we had emotion language, but we didn't really have a language that's be like, okay, we have these like tracks we can go down neurologically and they can feel very sticky. They're very powerful and they keep us from using our full wisdom and intelligence.
So I'll give a specific, because so I just did parts work for the first time 2 months ago. I had 2 sessions. I'll give a specific thing from my session
Good, yeah.
to tell you. So I I'm in the entertainment industry, so I've writing, acting, and all that stuff. So I've faced a lot of rejection. I've also had a lot of jobs that were like, "You're hired," and then 2 weeks later they're like, "Job fell through," or "Sorry."
Yeah.
So my energy system started to like feel, and I've also had people not pay me, so heightened and so like I have to be on the highest alert at all times.
Right.
And if I have a job interview, this is scary because you want this really bad, but you have to make sure they're not going to basically screw you over. That's really like it. So I literally saw a part when I like did this. So basically you go into a meditative state. I
Mhm.
saw a part and I literally saw like a dude at a control panel being like,
Yeah.
this like goblin figure being like, no, I have to be here. I
Mhm.
cannot leave this place to take care of you.
That's right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is that something that you've experienced sort of similar in
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, some people are more visual, some people feel it more somatically. There's not like a
yeah.
right way to do it. But some people more here like just get a knowing. But like often parts do show as like an image. Like I had a part also recently that was like this kind of like wild, like girl playing in the mud and like very like, animal like. And I'm like, okay, so like, and then you just stay curious, like, what are you showing me through that? And then I just learned like, oh, I learned that society will take over my fierceness or my authenticity or my, and so I have a part that's like really trying to cling to that. Like don't like let them kill you, it's like a learning about, like, and so, and so and by the way, none of that's bad. None of that's crazy. None of it's neurotic. That's great that you have a little like goblin-y person that's like, I don't know if you like got to the point where you're like, how are you protecting me or what's your job or
Yeah,
whatever, but
no, for sure. I can talk
yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you learn from that part?
So basically, I kept talking to it and I told him that it was okay to chill out. And it was funny because in both sessions, I kept putting all these parts on a very specific scene in the beach and
Mhm.
giving them like relaxation. Like I'd put one person on a hammock, I put another person like in the water. And they're like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, it's totally fine. Like I got this."
Okay, good. Okay, so I don't know if you want me to kind of analyze that a little bit.
Yeah,
Like,
please.
uh,
Yes.
So that's called, okay, so the first step with parts is unblending. So that's just saying, hey, I'm not this part.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's hard if it's like a shame voice or a critical voice or a whatever, to be able to say, okay, like I just have a part of me. I have a learning. This is a learned thing. It's not who I am. I just have this inner critic. Okay. And then like to be able to get when we kind of, that's called unblending. It just means being mindful of it, getting a little observing distance, saying like, okay, so I get that you're there, this part. I'm able to be in awareness with you. Um, One of the first steps of that, however, which is especially with something like an inner critic can be tricky, is we really want to bring our adults present capacity to it, not having another part that's like, I shouldn't criticize myself, or you're bad for criticizing me, or I'm scared of you, or just like, okay, I'm just going to bring you my curiosity,
Yeah.
even compassion. Okay, I kind of hate that you're around, inner critic. I mean, it's been a pain, but for right now, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm just going to get curious, and I'm just going to relate to you. I'm not going to try to push you away or manage you or to be taken over by you. I'm just like, I'm curious about you. Tell me, like, why does it feel so important to criticize, Tori? Like, why is that important? Where did you learn that that's an adaptive response, you know? And then that might be able to tell me like, well, like dad was really harsh. And like, so if I didn't criticize myself first, like he would, so I'd be vigilant against that, you know, and you can like actually start to learn why like anything that seems bad on the surface or frustrating or difficult, like has a good intention. Like, okay, that's valid.
Yeah.
Sometimes in that work, other parts that are like concerned about what's going on, like like ultimately the idea is to really get to know and like heal our parts. In the meantime, sometimes when we're just needing to go on with life, it's okay to kind of put them in like a nice safe space or like, you know, on the hammock or on the beach.
Yeah.
But that's not like the final goal. The final,
Oh, what's the
yes.
fun though? I thought
That's
I was
just,
like, okay, they're good. They're
no, that's
fine.
like, no, no, yeah, that doesn't permanently help them. I'm sorry.
But it feel honestly, it's felt really good though.
Well, that is a step one to be able to unblend from your parts is so empowering.
Yeah,
So
it feels great.
you know, it's to say, look, like I see you're there. You don't need to control me. And I want to go to this interview as my adult self or my current self,
Yeah.
not just with this like screaming neural network that's like danger and alarm, and we need to do this and like I just kind of want to say, look, I got this. Dick Schwartz, who invented it, often he'll tell his parts when they're asking him to step back, like, we got this. You know, like it's okay. Like everything's okay right now. You can relax a little bit. That being said, any part that you actually want to fully, what's called unburden, that means like actually change its learning. So it really can be free. You want to not just talk to it and say, hey, it's okay and things are okay. You want to hear from it. Really, what did you learn? Like, why are you doing this role? What's going on? What did you learn? Um, and then this part may be a little different than the one you're talking about because it came on as an adult, but often our protector parts are actually protecting a more wounded part underneath.
Yeah.
And so, and again, this may be a little different because it's like an adult thing for you, but like, but maybe not. Maybe it touches on like why it was so painful to get rejection was because you know, you had rejection when you were 10 that was painful that never got resolved. You know, you never know. So when you're asking protector parts to soften back, ultimately the real question is, who are you protecting inside?
Mm.
And then you have to get their permission, and it takes some steps of like, does it feel safe? I know your job has been to make sure Tori never looks at that pain. That's your job. It never happens again, and she never looks at it, and she's okay. But now we actually have an adult to bring some like healing energy to, not just managing energy, which is actually not healing energy, you know, but real healing energy to. Do you mind softening back? And you can go to the beach if you want to do that. But now let's look at an actual wounded part underneath. Yeah. And then that's where things really flow in a very deep and beautiful way because, and it sounds scary, but once all the protector parts have actually been like, okay, no, it's okay to look at this. And we're talking about, that's like the goals. Like, can we look at this without like all the voices like, no, I can't, it'll overwhelm me. I'll be, you know, it's like, okay, all that softens back. Actually, when we get in touch, when we see our like young child in the scene of them getting hurt, you know, like usually we have tons of compassion
Yeah.
and we can just go to that child and say, tell me what that was like for you. I'm really ready now to actually metabolize that and look at it, which is, you could also think is a type of grief work too. But then they say, this was really, really hard when dad would criticize me like that. Da, da, da. And then, and tell me about it. What did you learn? I learned that I was bad. I learned that I'm just bound to be a fuck up. Like I'm learning that, you know, okay, wow, you learned all that. okay, I'm here now because I'm an adult now. I wasn't around when this happened, so I couldn't have done this for you then, but I'm here now and I can tell you, you are very valuable. And that was not your fault.
Mm.
And then you can like work with, and then would you like to go to the beach? Then that part has to get to the
So
beach
it's
too.
just not enough to send them on vacation.
You
Okay.
can't, yeah. That's okay. You're just getting started. You'll have the deeper levels, hopefully.
So yeah, like, is it a long process? Like this, is it a lot of sessions? And is there an end to the parts that you're talking to?
No, it doesn't have to be that long. And yeah, there's an end.
Oh, really? You think so? Okay.
It really just depends on how you think about it. Like there's a probably finite number of main themes in our life and fears. And like, I think sometimes our mental health is like something we became phobic of that doesn't need to be, it's not helpful to have a phobic reaction to,
Totally.
like whether it be our feelings or setting boundaries or letting people close or like saying no or like being in, it's like something became phobicized and we're
Yeah.
just wanting to undo that fear conditioning. And so we probably have like a limited number of like core themes, but it could be 10 or 20 or, it could be like, you do have to work on, and they can like interlace and it can get complicated, but it's not like endlessly forever. I mean, that being said, it's now been 25 years since I went to my first experiential therapy training. So I've been doing inner work for a long time and I still
I love it. You're like, yeah, it's not that long. It's 25 years. It's not that
25 years,
long.
and I had a pretty good childhood too. So it's really funny. But like, and I've had like just loads of therapy. When I was 20, I was meditating like hours a day. And so I've done like a crazy amount of personal growth work. And still I'll like hit up against a weird reaction and be like, okay, there's a little learning in there a little association, something that came on either as a child or maybe even as an adult that is making me have this kind of funny problematic reaction, like I'm putting too much pressure on my teaching, or I'm putting this, and then so, and often even I need help to slow down and say like, okay, like this is why I actually have just recently been working with an IFS, one of the IFS faculty member has been doing sessions with me. It's great. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, there's that part, like, huh. So I don't know if it's a different part or it's another layer of work with it, or like I think we can sometimes over reify these things too, like make them a little more real than they are. In other words, like the mind is like constantly changing and emerging and it's complex and like so, but so it's kind of a both and like on the one hand, like it's not like endless work and you can get like pretty far in just a number of sessions, 5 to 10 sessions with something like IFS, like, and that's what's so amazing about it. And it's never like, it's not black and white, it's like you can grow and find things and bump into things like literally your whole life.
Yeah, and I think what's beautiful, the main beautiful takeaway is there are no bad parts. But have you ever met anyone from Boston? There's a lot of bad parts. There's so many bad parts.
So many bad parts. I
Yeah.
know. Yes.
But it's really beautiful to, and I've started seeing this recently. I've also started seeing it as just like actually the things you don't like about your body or like your emotional energy system is actually only there to keep you safe. And it's
Everything has
permanent.
positive
Yeah,
intent.
that's
Yeah.
it. And if you start seeing it like that, you stop thinking that something's wrong with you. And that's something that I've literally thought for a long time. And I think sometimes in the self-help world, it can make you feel that way because everyone's going on telling these stories like, and then I had positive affirmations and I made
No,
$10 million. And
no,
you're
God,
like,
that
what the
stuff is
fuck?
such BS. I hate that stuff. Oh my Lord, don't get me wrong.
Why do you hate it?
There's just no, to me, there's just no way that becoming a more superficial person is the way to have a deep and beautiful life. Like to me, like depth
Oh,
is the
wow. That's a
only,
beautiful thing that you just said. Holy
yeah.
cow.
Yeah. Life is deep. It's rich. We are deep. We're incredibly complex. We can either turn towards that and grapple with it. And that is the only way I feel like this life doesn't eat you alive.
So you think like, oh, positive affirmations. Well, I had this guy, Panache Desai, said this great thing on my podcast once. He said, why would I want to 10? Everyone's like 10x your life. He's like, why would I want to 10x my suffering? If my life sucks right now and I take everything to the next level, I'm just going to next level my suffering. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, our culture. Yeah. I mean, just we're so phobic of complexity. We're so phobic of pain, grief for sure, anger, even anger. I know it seems like we're like, oh, but no, we're like so scared of ourselves. I mean, I think there are full forms of therapy that for years have been just designed on that particular fear. Remember I said mental health is like
Yeah.
problems come, we learn to fear something that's actually healthy. analytic therapy, psychodynamic, like a lot of therapies, like for years have been based on the core idea that we are afraid of ourselves
Mm.
or something in our inner mind, a memory, emotion, a need, something that's authentic to us. Some, you could say part of us, I guess, but, or just not even a part, just like a natural process. Like, um, and, um, and I just, so if it is a little scary to go inside. I think the two fears are I'll get overwhelmed or I'll find something bad.
Yeah.
And that's why something like parts work is helpful, because the unblending process helps it be less overwhelming. You know, everything stays organized. It's not chaos in there. It's like, okay, just this part and that part. Like, oh, that makes sense. And I can, if that part wants to talk first, I can send the other to the beach. So it's not everyone talking to me at once. And it just kind of like organizes things and slows it down so it's less overwhelming. And then two, there is no bad. It is impossible to find something bad inside.
That's great.
Yeah. And there can be bad experiences we've had, bad things happen to us that should never have happened to us. That's for sure. I mean, obviously, and we can have memories of those that are very painful. So I don't mean like every memory is a good memory or is, you know, experience was good. But us, like in terms of finding ourselves, it every part of our mind and brain is there trying to help us have a good life. So even if we're doing something that's seemingly self-sabotaging or immoral, I mean, you know,
I love him. I love
harmful.
him. Immorality. I'm into it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's really true. There even things like you could be a rageaholic and and again, I'm not saying that's okay behavior, like, but we could try to shame that behavior into changing all day long. And it's just not going to work if we slow down and say, who is this in me that's raging? Like what? And build a relationship with that part. Like really tell me. Again, you don't have to do it through parts imagery. You could just say, I have a learning inside. And in coherence therapy, we should call it a schema, some neural network that knows something, predicts something. I have somewhere I learned inside it's essential and urgent that I rage, or it's essential and urgent that I procrastinate, or I judge myself, or I feel better than others, or whatever the thing is. And like, if we can actually slow down and just say, okay, can I just learn about what that's based on rather than trying to control it? And I can actually map out like, oh, okay, so it's like, I better blank because if I don't blank, and you can really like begin to put language to it and make it conscious and say, okay, that actually makes sense. Or it doesn't, but like it made sense at some point. Like maybe we learned some kind of rules of the game. Like in my abusive family, you absolutely have to like always stick up for yourself, or you absolutely have to always submit, or you absolutely, and that was true for that context. And now we just moved into a different context where the rules can be different, and but our rules haven't updated. You know, like we're still living as if we're back in the old context. Okay, that's why these things seem kind of crazy or problematic, or we feel stuck. Like yes, we do want to update these learnings and patterns to our current context because they're not always productive anymore. Um,
So I had this thought
yeah.
when you're like, why are people so scared to go inward? And I just asked myself that question. And I think it's because a lot of us feel like we're not good enough and that we're scared if we go inward and look, we will confirm that. That will be like,
Exactly.
I'm a piece of shit and I'm scared that whatever is going on deep inside of me will only confirm that even more.
That's why so having a really clear, even just I mean, probably as a starting place, just learning about it philosophically and scientifically is helpful to give a little more faith and trust in the process. And then having a therapist is helpful because it can help you go slow but there's no way that if you turn in and truly understand any facet of your mind, you will have compassion for it.
Yeah. Especially like you said, when we realize that it's only there literally doing a job to keep you alive.
Yeah.
Like, and so what I like what you do is it's basically to me how I see it is like you're changing the energetic imprint of how you respond to the world. And I want people to know that it doesn't have to be autopilot. And the way you respond to the world right now can change that quickly if you change your response system. However you want to call that. You can call it,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like
And
however you see it.
yeah, and my preference, there's many wonderful ways to change. So I don't want to tell anyone how to change. But I think we lean too much into I'm going to change my response by just trying to change my behaviors,
Yes.
or just try to change my inner monologue, like replace a negative thought with a positive thought. And I think the deepest way to change is through building relationship.
Mm.
So don't, like, if I sat down with you and be like, okay, let's sit down so I can tell you why you're wrong and stupid and you should change. I'll just tell you what to do. Like, you'd be like, I don't feel related to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
why am I going to reveal myself to you and like actually be open to what you have to say until you've heard me, you know? Like, we have to feel listened to before we are open to listening, right? And the same is with our mind. Like, if we don't go into our mind first saying, you tell me how this makes sense. I'm
Mm.
not trying to override you. I'm not trying to put a better thought in there. I'm not trying to convince myself I have value. I'm just like, can you tell me why it was important and protective at some point to make it my fault? And then
Mm.
that part might say, well, I had to. I had to convince you it was your fault, because if not, you might have put your head up and targeted more abuse, or, you know, whatever the thing is. And then you go like, okay, I get that. I get that. Um, and then you've earned that part's open. I mean, this is a metaphorical way of talking about it. Like, if we went into like the biology of it, it either leans like so far metaphorical, like it's, you've earned its trust and then it can open to you, but like literally in my mind, I'm like, okay, that neural, you have electricity running down that neural network, which has to happen for memory consolidation. Like, there's a very technical way we could talk about it, which is the same thing. It's just technical talk takes us out of the wrong, puts us in the wrong part of our brain for this kind of work. So it's nice to use more like imagery and like metaphor and stuff like that.
But doesn't the subconscious mind operate in symbols and imagery anyways? Like,
Exactly. It's like, that's why we lean into, like, we could say you have a subcortical, you know, limbic, kind of what we used to call limbic, now we generally call subcortical, like neural network imprinted in implicit memory that knows to predict danger. If you know, had a moment of pride, that you're going to get then for slapped in the face because that's not okay, and then therefore knows this thing. And like, we could say that's like a whole neural firing pattern. And like, for memory consolidation, you have to have like the firing pattern activated, while at the same time it's making that prediction, sees evidence that disconfirms the prediction, what the neuroscientists call a mismatch experience. And anyway, and that's wonderful. But what's cool about IFS is like, you don't have to understanding of that science, but the experience itself creates that in the brain.
mm,
It creates that mismatch where, like, on the one hand, one neural firing pattern network is firing, which is the part, because it's talking to you. So it has to be having electricity running down that neural network, because it's literally telling you, I believe this. This is what I predict. So you have that prediction activated. And then the adult self, because you've unblended, can say like, wait, actually, now that I'm looking at that again, I don't think that actually was your fault that mom left when you were 8. You know what I mean? And then, and kind of like, and then that's a new knowing, a different, it's like a what they call disconfirmation. And then that literal mismatch between one prediction and the new evidence unlocks the proteins in the brain that holds those patterns together so they can reorganize. Like, that's amazing. But
wow.
like,
Is that neuroplasticity then?
it's the most powerful form of neuroplasticity we know of, which is almost never talked about. Usually the neurons that fire together, that wire together, Hebb's law, is the one that we talk about in a lot of pop psychology and just a lot of psychology. But there's a less known and much more powerful version of neuroplasticity called memory reconsolidation, where you can rewire whole neural networks in 2 or 3 seconds, like I said. But again, it's not, it takes some work to set that up. It's hard to have a fear-based neural network activated without getting dysregulated. And
Oh
that's always the dance of therapy, is like, how can we activate it enough that neural network is online, but keep you regulated so you can have the mismatch experience and have new data come in. And there's a million ways. It's not just parts work that you could do. You could do it through somatic tracking. You could do it through the relationship between the therapist and client, like creating safety that way. And like, so there's many different ways of opening to the old knowing while having a new experience that proves it wrong, basically. Like,
listen,
those,
if this worked in a way that would change my neural network, I'd be down to be activated highly, and then I'll just go eat a box of cookies and it's gonna be fine.
you know, again, it's not about, some people are like, like, I'm okay with big emotion. It's just that your brain has to not be feeling that it's in danger, because if it feels it's in danger, your mismatch detection system goes offline, so memory consolidation can happen, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of reasons this doesn't just like naturally happen in real life, even though we have disconfirming experiences all the time. We might be predicting, oh my God, if I make a mistake, my wife will like judge me horribly and like hate me and leave me. And then we do, and she doesn't. And like, so that could be very healing if it happens to land as a mismatch, but there's all sorts of reasons that like, there's usually not enough awareness. It's not slow enough. We don't feel safe enough to let the whole thing change us. So that's why therapy is kind of there to create these moments where it's like, okay, look, can we bring online in a felt way? We can't talk about it because that doesn't activate the actual neural network. Can we bring online in a felt way what felt true, what you got imprinted? That neural network knows, because we have to have electricity running down it. Can we tap into it? Can we listen to it? And then at the same time, witness some other truth.
So how would you describe parts work different from coherence therapy? Because we keep talking about coherence therapy, we haven't fully delved into it.
Yeah, coherence therapy is very similar. It's just they don't use parts language for it. So they would just say, you have learned. Like I wouldn't say like, oh, a part of you learned to
Got it.
fear the thing. They're saying, okay, so I mean, they might like lightly say you a part of you, like, oh, okay, some corner of your mind or some part of you. They might use that word, but or they might just say, okay, so on some level you feel this. So we lean a lot more into language in coherence therapy. We make like the statement of the schema. Okay, so I better, you know, keep myself from ever trying taking a risk because or feeling this, because if I do, I'll be, I don't know, rageaholic like my father. So I should, so I better shut it down through drinking. And we really kind of like map out what the learning is, what that prediction and
Yeah.
and you can do all that without ever using the word part. It's not like that's like an essential element. It's just that parts language is user friendly and it opens up to the kind of space that we're trying to create in therapy, where now we can be relating to something and we can have compassion, and it's a lovely way up the mountain, but it's not like the only way up the mountain.
Hmm. Okay, cool. So you said this great thing. You said you had a video called Why It's So Hard to Love Yourself. Isn't it because we fucking suck?
I know. I'm always just going to keep saying the opposite of what you're saying, but yes, no, it is because we're so amazing. But no, I mean, it was true. Like, yes, there's so many different reasons why we can be attached to why our shame can be, for like serve a functional purpose for the system that makes it feel safe. Um, when kids, again, a lot of it comes down like what we started. They do not want to blame their parents. They do not want to see their parents are effing it up.
Yeah.
One, that could be too terrifying for a kid. And then they would put them in a brain state where they can't learn and develop and go to school and make friends. So they have to, it's just organizes things. Say like, oh, it's probably my fault. It gives them a little bit more sense of power if they make it their fault and they're the bad one. Um, it makes the universe feel more just, which is existentially easier to swallow. Um, um, it buries grief because it's not so sad. Really, if I deserve it, the whole thing is not so sad. It's just how I deserve to be treated. It's just normal. And we don't have to tag it as like, actually, it's really tragic. So there's a lot of like psychological protective things it does to blame ourselves when we're kids. That's why it's really, when I love Kristen Neff's work with self-compassion and, I love self-compassion practices,
Yeah.
but I think sometimes we don't realize like at the same time, you have to slow down if you really want to deepen all the way through it and get curious about like, is this scary for me to love myself? Like, what does it bump me into something that's like either existentially difficult because now I have to realize what I endured was abuse, and that's terrifying and very sad. And if I also happen to have a learning that says sadness is dangerous and is weak or something or will break
Right.
me, then I better not do like just keep everything status quo, just keep how I am, don't rock the boat. So there's a lot of, I think that's why it's nice to have a therapist that can hold this kind of nuance. I will say there's not a ton of therapists that know how to do that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's why I often try to lean into IFS when I'm making videos and things. Isn't because I mean I think it's a really wonderful form of therapy, but I think it just is more amenable than other forms of therapy to self-help. And even though I really prefer everyone do this in therapy, there's just not enough therapists, like and
No,
like
and not doing this, like it was hard for me to actually to find an IFS therapist.
yep, yep, it's very in demand. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you personally do for self-love that's worked for you?
Well, again, it's been a long journey, but I was very spiritual in my young 20s, through my 20s. I was gonna say until having kids.
Then you stop believing in
I
God.
stopped being spiritual. But no, literally, I stopped.
Yes, you're like, there is no God. There is no God.
Exactly right. So when I was 20, I was doing spiritual retreats and feeling one with like it just I wasn't doing parts work at that time, but I was doing something a little bit more than just typical meditation. I was like feeling into my heart because it was like through Sufism, which is like very mystical, and feeling into my heart and finding the hurt places and then like connecting to the universe, the divine, and like chanting and meditating and all those wonderful things. And I just think anytime you're going inward, it is really hard not to fall in love with yourself.
Aw, it's so beautiful.
True. It is true.
It's
I
just
found
so
that
funny because I feel like so many people don't feel that way. They
because
almost feel the
they've never gone inward. It is so easy to judge someone you don't see. And we keep so many of our parts in
oh
the
my
closet.
God.
Yeah.
Yo, can you please repeat that?
Well, it's really true, isn't it? When we have parts of us we're not even wanting to look and turn to because we're afraid of them, then we aren't actually seeing ourselves. And it's easy to judge all day unless you look in somebody's eyes.
And that somebody is you.
And that somebody's you or some part of you or your young you or whatever. And when you bring your own kind of pain out of the closet, you're like, holy shit. Okay, I get it. Oh my God, I get it. Oh man, I've been doing my best this whole time. It's like and I've never not seen that happen ever. Like I've never seen someone look more clearly at themselves and go into more judgment. You know, like if it's always because they're not looking that they're in judgment. But if they slow down and say, okay, for a moment, I forget the judgments out of the way and just be like, have an open mind. If I look at myself, which does mean having to look at my pain, that's the whole reason we don't do it because we don't want to see the pain.
Mhm.
But then when we avoid the pain, that means we avoid seriously, like sincerely looking at our story and what we experience and why. And, and then it's easy to be like, just make up a narrative. We just make up a bullshit narrative. Like, well, I wasn't trying hard enough, or I'm just innately lazy, or like, and it's just like total bullshit. It's like, what? Like, just make something up to explain it,
That's exactly what we do. And then it's so funny. And then we're like, well, that's just the truth. It's like, is it? You're just pulling
Made
this.
that up.
No one else feels this way. You are the only one. I had this great person on my podcast say, the only person who's judging you is you. And I love that.
We judge ourselves so harshly, and weirdly enough, it's out of love for ourselves. Ultimately, it's like even that judging part came in because it thought it had to save our ass.
Mm,
And it just gets, but then it just gets layered, and we get but further and further away from really consciously looking at the whole thing.
wow. I just love that you said that. Okay, well, I like to close. This has been amazing by playing a game called Spiritual or Asshole, where I say some things and you tell me if it's spiritual or asshole. Are you down?
Sure.
Okay. Spiritual or asshole, doing parts work therapy and saying, hey, I only want to talk to the hot part of me.
Asshole. Unless it's a joke, and then it's just funny.
Spiritual or asshole, requiring that every time you do therapy, your parents have to zoom in so you can say to them, look at what you did to me.
Okay, asshole.
Spiritual or asshole, cold plunges.
Oh, I don't know spiritual. I don't know much about it, but
Spiritual or asshole, because you're a musician, this is for you. Spiritual or asshole, wearing the t-shirt of the band that you're going to see in concert to the concert.
oh, spiritual.
Spiritual or asshole, wearing a t-shirt that has a picture of your own brain at a brain conference.
I just realized I should be saying spiritual for everyone. I mean, given our past,
No, there's no shoulds. It's fine.
there's no asshole. So it just depends on what level you're talking about. Asshole on the surface, spiritual underneath.
Wonderful. This is a good one. Spiritual or asshole, instead of taking notes during a session with a client, you're secretly taking a quiz called "What kind of Harry Potter therapist would you be" on BuzzFeed?
Okay, that one was that's too clear asshole that I'll just name that.
It's great. Spiritual or asshole, treating breaking up with your therapist like a breakup with a romantic partner, where you just look your therapist in the eye and be like, "It's not you, it's
Not
me.
you, it's me.
Clearly me. It's clearly me."
Spiritual.
Good. Spiritual asshole saying, "It's cool. I don't need therapy. I'll just go to an open mic and tell everyone."
Spiritual.
Wonderful. All right, last question I ask everybody. If you could tell people one thing to tell themselves all day long, what would it be?
Actually, I would say stop telling yourself anything and just listen.
Wow, you're the first person to say that.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's great. Okay, well, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
I mean, YouTube, Tori Olds. If you're a therapist, I have courses and online courses and stuff, toriolds.com, but probably
Are you on
YouTube.
Instagram? I couldn't really find you.
Nope. I I'm old. Didn't you know I'm old?
You're not old. God, whatever your age is going to be younger than me, and then it's going to make me feel old as fuck.
And then I said old. Well, I'm in my mid 40s, but no, I'm not, I have not figured out Instagram yet.
Okay, no worries. All right, so
on
yeah,
it. But YouTube, I could do YouTube. I haven't figured out TikTok. That's also too young for me, but YouTube is kind of it's a good age for me. It's a good thing for me.
it's a good age, is fantastic.
And my website, if you know, are a therapist and want some online CU trainings and stuff.
All right, well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. It's great to talk to you, man.